Tonight, the world of cinema mourns the loss of a visionary. Acclaimed New Zealand filmmaker Lee Tamahori, the man who gave the world Once Were Warriors, has passed away at the age of 75 after a long battle with Parkinson's disease. The director, known for his unflinching storytelling and deep cultural insight, died peacefully at home, surrounded by his family. His loved ones say he left this world the same way he lived in it, with courage, dignity, and a spark of creative fire that never dimmed. In a heartfelt statement, his whānau described him as a charismatic leader and a fierce creative spirit who championed Maori talent both on and off screen. They said his legacy will endure through his family, his mokopuna, every filmmaker he inspired, and every story he told with his genius eye and honest heart. Lee Tamahori was more than a filmmaker. He was a storyteller who reshaped the way the world viewed New Zealand and its people. Born in Wellington in 1950 and of Ngāti Porou descent, Tamahori's early life was a blend of creativity and curiosity. Before the cameras rolled, he worked as a commercial artist and photographer, exploring the world through still images before turning to motion pictures. His entry into film came in the late 1970s, working as a boom operator, a humble start for a man who would soon take Hollywood by storm. Over time, his skill for capturing emotion and tension found a home behind the camera, directing commercials that went on to win international awards. But it was his 1994 debut feature, Once Were Warriors, that would forever define his career and shake New Zealand society to its core. Once Were Warriors wasn't just a movie. It was a cultural earthquake. Based on Alan Duff's novel, the film told the raw and heart-wrenching story of an urban Maori family torn apart by domestic violence and poverty. It forced an entire nation to confront the realities too often hidden behind closed doors. Temuera Morrison's portrayal of Jake the Muss Heke and Rena Owens' haunting performance as Beth remain among the most powerful in New Zealand's cinematic history. The film's brutal honesty sparked national conversations about identity, violence, and the legacy of colonization. Internationally, it was praised for its courage and artistry, earning accolades from Time magazine and major film festivals across the world. Once Were Warriors went on to become the highest-grossing film in New Zealand for years, a benchmark that reflected not just its success, but its cultural importance. The film's success catapulted Tamahori into Hollywood's spotlight. Soon, the man from Wellington found himself directing some of the biggest stars in the world. He worked with Anthony Hopkins and Alec Baldwin on The Edge in 1997. And just a few years later, he took the reins of one of cinema's most iconic franchises, James Bond. In 2002, he directed Die Another Day, starring Pierce Brosnan and Halle Berry, blending action spectacle with the signature Tamahori touch. Intensity, precision, and emotional depth. Later, he directed Next with Nicolas Cage, and even stepped into the world of television, directing an episode of the acclaimed series The Sopranos. For many, his journey from the streets of Wellington to the sound stages of Hollywood was nothing short of inspirational. Proof that New Zealand's stories and talent could command the global stage. But behind the glamour of Hollywood, Tamahori remained deeply connected to his roots. He often spoke about his Maori heritage and his responsibility as a storyteller to represent his culture truthfully. He continued to create films that celebrated and examined New Zealand's social fabric, including Mahana in 2016, which reunited him with Warriors star Temuera Morrison. The film told the story of two rival families battling for supremacy in the shearing sheds, another exploration of identity, pride, and belonging. Tamahori's ability to weave personal emotion with cultural themes made his work universally resonant. Whether he was directing an intense family drama or a high-octane action thriller, his signature remained the same: raw human emotion, and an unfiltered lens on the truth. Of course, Tamahori's life was not without controversy. In 2006, he made headlines after being arrested in Los Angeles for allegedly offering sexual services to an undercover police officer while dressed in drag. The story made front-page news in New Zealand and sparked a wave of public scrutiny. Tamahori later described it as a moment of early internet savagery, admitting that while the incident was embarrassing, it barely made a dent in his Hollywood career. "Nobody gave a over there," he said bluntly in an interview with Hakata Mari earlier this year. It was only here. He faced the fallout with his trademark honesty, completing community service and moving forward. The incident, like much of his life, showed his resilience, a refusal to be defined by scandal, and a determination to keep telling stories that mattered. In his later years, Tamahori faced a different kind of battle: Parkinson's disease. The illness gradually limited his physical abilities, but never dimmed his mind or spirit. "Mentally, I still have my marbles," he joked in an April interview, his wit intact even as his health declined. Friends and colleagues recall that he remained as sharp, as insightful, and as passionate as ever about film and culture. Even in his final years, he continued to work, releasing The Convert in 2024, a historical drama that explored faith, identity, and cultural collision in 19th-century Aotearoa. It would become his final film, a fitting close to a career defined by courage and cultural truth. As news of his death spread, tributes poured in from across the world. Fellow directors, actors, and cultural leaders remembered Tamahori as a trailblazer who opened doors for generations of Maori filmmakers. Many called him a bridge between worlds, someone who brought indigenous stories to international audiences without compromising their authenticity. His colleagues praised his fierce dedication on set, his meticulous attention to detail, and his gift for pulling extraordinary performances out of his actors. To his family and community, however, he was simply Lee, a father, partner, and Koro whose laughter, wisdom, and creativity shaped the lives of those around him. On Sunday, November 9th, friends and whanau gathered at Te Mahurehure Marae in Point Chevalier, Auckland, to celebrate his life and legacy, sharing stories, memories, and music. Following the Tangihanga, Tamahori will return to the Te Rawiti for a private farewell with his closest family and friends. There, among the hills and sea that inspired so much of his work, he will be laid to rest. But his spirit, that bold, uncompromising creative force, will live on in every film he made and every filmmaker he inspired. Lee Tamahori showed the world that stories from a small island nation could shake hearts across the globe. He proved that art could be both brutally honest and beautifully human. And as we say goodbye to one of New Zealand's greatest cinematic voices, we remember the words his family shared. His legacy endures, not just on screen, but in every boundary he broke, every story he told, and every life he touched. Rest in peace, Lee Tamahori, the warrior who once was and always will be.